Chairman, I would like to introduce Craig Caulfield.
Good morning, Mr. Cronican. Nothing is more important than restoring trust for the shareholders of National Australia Bank and the customers. My name's Craig Caulfield. I'm a founder of Bank Warriors and I'm an advisor to Bank Reform Now. We've had 51 bank inquiries in the last 10 years. Inquiries, hearings, the Royal Commission. Things are just not being repaired. We heard from Mr. Schott saying the same thing before. In your chairman's message, we can only move forward if we deal with the past. The Royal Commission rightly called out us failing to meet customers' expectations. Along the way, we lost trust with customers and the broader community. We are addressing the issues of the past, and we're making things right where we have made mistakes. I wanted to point out two things. I'm here to call out wrongdoing, but I also think it's very important to call out right doing. And there are a couple of things that the bank and NAB is doing right, and I'd like to tell you about those briefly, and please don't stop me at the end of that before I get to wrongdoing. It says we take full accountability for our failings and have been transparent. I'd like to point out some right doing, and that is the APRA governance report. I think there are 5 financial institutions of the 36 that have now revealed or published their report. Of the 4 major banks, ANZ excluded. Commonwealth Bank had to publish theirs compulsorily, and Westpac, thank you to them, published theirs 9 months after the report was done. And I note that National Australia Bank was the only one of the 4 major banks to publish their report in full without redactions very quickly. So thank you for that. In relation to that report, I do note that it was conducted by EY, and I'm concerned that EY...
Sorry, I need to
am I wrong with that?
No, EY was not involved in that report.
Okay, stand corrected on that. Let me redact that. The second item, the second bouquet I'd like to dish out is in relation to model litigant. I raised it with Dr. Henry last year at the AGM, and immediately after the AGM I spoke with your Chief Legal Counsel, Sharon Cook. I didn't think a Chief Legal Counsel would be interested in fairness principles. Sharon engaged very openly, immediately, genuinely, and we did work together over several months. And NAB's model litigant principles were published, and you, Mr. Cronican, announced them at the House Economics Committee. In relation to them, NAB went further than any of the other model litigant principles, and that was to say that we will provide documents within 7 days to our customers, or within 21 days if they're long-standing and you've got storage retrieval systems. So I'd like to thank you on publishing the APRA report, and to Sharon Cook with model litigant. In terms of the wrongdoing, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand there are about 48 legacy cases. That's what I'm particularly interested in. 20 of those you've resolved, and I would like to say thank you from Selwyn Crepp, who is a long-standing case that you've resolved. And I know that you worked with Boyd Fraser and his help with Sir Edward Weary Dunlop's family, and you issued a letter, and that did a lot to help bring the momentum of resolving that together, so thank you on those counts. But what are the directors doing to resolve the other cases? Now, we've just heard you talk about, we've got a foot in our camp saying that we think we're right, and you've got a foot in your camp saying you're right. Surely these 28 remaining legacy cases are a 15th of the capitalisation of the bank. I think I was a bit concerned, respectfully, Mr. McEwen, that you spoke of legal proceedings, for example, and you will not reopen those. Legal proceedings that I've seen, and I'm privy to some of these cases, ran totally counter to some of the model litigant principles. I would respectfully ask you to engage with each of those 28 or less remaining cases in your role. Now, I won't go into the cases individually, but I will mention Bill Mott, Faye Andrews, Lewis Tomasini, represented by Rita, Linton Freeman, the Ganesh family, and Barry Lander. They're of particular concern to me amongst them. If I can move on to in January this year, I attended the CYBG annual general meeting. I was pleased to see that a severance amount, an indemnity amount of £1.7 billion was set aside for legacy complaints, including PPI insurance. However, a whistleblower at NAB reported that CYBG had requested £2.5 billion. So there's a substantial gap that there are remaining victims that feel that they are shortchanged that should be addressed. I would like you to address that, please. I was unable to attend a meeting yesterday with my colleague and UK Bank Warrior friends, Ian Lightbody and John Goody, who are here today. I was at the ANZ annual general meeting. They met with Jocelyn Turner and they tell me that it was a very successful meeting and they appreciate that. Ian would like me to be involved as an Australian representative in a small oversight team, a limited, independent remediation process in the UK. I'd like you to give consideration to that too, please. Moving forward, I've got a range of several items that I'd like you to consider, and I would like to thank your director, Anne Sherry, who took the time to meet with me, and I did ask to meet with Anne, and that's because Anne is the head of your customer committee. So I'm very grateful for Anne's time there. So for Anne, I'm repeating some of these, but for the others, I'd like to put it on the record. That is to have a complaints metrics that you publish. That would include IDR, customer advocate, AFCA, and court cases. A BEAR accountability map. We've all got these BEAR maps. Nothing is disclosed. We get the soft shoe shuffle from executive to executive. It would be good to have something published that's accountable. Ban political donations, but add that to your constitution. Encourage BFO membership. You spoke at the House Economics Committee, Mr. Cronican, and now that you have no conflicts, etc., because you're not a director or a special advisor, you know, if NAB has 30,000 employees, I can't see why 300 or 1% can't be members. And AFCA has a data cube now that they publish that shows the success or failures or metrics on the cases coming through. I think each bank, including NAB specifically today, should publish that to your website and point out where NAB sits within that so that we can visually measure that. I'd like to thank you for allowing me the time.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I won't go into detail. You've raised a lot of issues. Clearly, it's not possible for me to talk about any individual case, but I appreciate that you've acted in conjunction with a number of the customers, many of whom I've met with, not all, but many I have. I just want to clarify the comment you've made around the provisions that were left behind in the UK to deal with issues. The issues are the issues, so the liability will fall where it lies. That amount was a contractual amount between CYB and National Australia Bank. That shouldn't itself be an impediment to any issue being resolved. But we can take that up.
That's good to hear.
Elsewhere. And I'm pleased that you've, I don't know whether Mr. Lightbody was going to raise questions that he's here. I understand he's in the room. But obviously we have set aside a couple of executives to meet. I know that happened yesterday. In terms of your comments about being more open around issues upon complaints metrics, BEAR accountabilities, I'm not sure how helpful it would be to get our BEAR accountability statements. They are rather long and complex. And maybe that's a challenge in itself, which is to simplify them for us. But certainly it would present me no problems to give a summary of who's accountable for what among the senior executive. I think that's a useful contribution and one that I'll take back to the board for conversation. And I also am happy, now that I'm no longer in position of both being a senior executive of the bank and being a director of the BFO, to play a more prominent role in advocating that the banking and finance oath as an anchor for ethical behaviour in the organisation be promoted more strongly. So I'll talk with Ross about that. I haven't had a chance to do so yet. But thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.